Welcome to the 25th lecture of the course on sociological perspectives on modernity. We are discussing the deconstruction of modernity through the lenses of feminism, cultural studies and postmodernism. We have already covered feminism, the feminist challenge to critical modernist paradigm in sociology, and also cultural studies challenge to critical modernist paradigm in sociology. In this and today, we are going to discuss the postmodernist challenge to critical modernist paradigm in sociology as a part of deconstruction of modernity. Postmodernist challenge to critical modernist paradigm in sociology will be divided into 3 lectures. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss the postmodernist phenomenon, postmodernist aesthetics and postmodernity as a historical condition. In the second one, in the next lecture, we will discuss postmodernism as ontology as well as epistemology. And in the third lecture, we will discuss feminism and postmodernism as a test case. We'll start with the postmodernist phenomenon. Postmodernism, in fact, emerged in the 1980s as a buzzword, as a globalized phenomenon, but then extended backwards to cover developments in literature and literary criticism, philosophy, visual art, architecture and so on since the 1950s, especially from the 1970s onward. It has its own intellectual antecedents, namely French post-structuralist philosophy and its encounter with Anglo-American literary criticism and cultural studies, and now governing a set of ideas, at least in some contexts. It is not a coherent school of thought or body of thought, but a series of ideas combined or separated in differing ways by different authors. If you look at Derrida, if you look at Foucault, if you look at Lacan and so on, you will find that they also don't have any particular, they do not have any agreement on what constitutes postmodern condition, what constitutes postmodernism. There are 3 central ideas through which postmodernism is embedded. One is culture, secondly society, and thirdly meta-narratives. We will discuss one by one. What are these 3 central ideas? Culture as produced and received is postmodern in form and content. Postmodernist aesthetics versus modernist aesthetics. Suppose what was modernist aesthetics? Industrial revolution, reasoning capacity, rationality, critique to religion, and so on. And what is postmodernist aesthetics? We'll discuss. Secondly, society can now be seen as having moved into a postmodern condition. Again, postmodernity versus modernity. Society, especially political economy for postmodernists. And thirdly, for a variety of reasons, the meta-narratives which legitimate the knowledge of modern intellectuals can no longer be sustained. Postmodernism versus the Enlightenment project. All industrial revolution, rationality, critical thinking, reasoning capacity and so on. Then prima facie, if we have to look at these three central ideas, that culture is as produced and received is postmodern in form and content. Society, especially political economy, can now be seen as having moved into a postmodern condition, and the meta-narratives which legitimate the knowledge of modern intellectuals can no longer be sustained. Then what is this postmodernist aesthetics? We have discussed modernist aesthetics, postmodernist aesthetics. See, for the sake of this course, this is not very important to discuss postmodernist aesthetics, rather it is very important to discuss postmodernity as a historical condition. Okay. But before dwelling upon postmodernity as a historical condition, it is always better to give some kind of an overview of postmodernist aesthetics. Very quickly we will cover this portion that postmodernist aesthetics. I mean, it is largely irrelevant for our purposes, related to argument about modernist aesthetics. Okay. The dominant version is related to a traditionalist view of culture as cultural artifacts, especially literature, but also extended such as to film, television, advertisements and so on, sometimes, but by no means always, taken one step further into discussion of reception of these by audience. How do we receive them? Suppose in a movie, how do we receive it? A movie like Lagan, how do we receive a movie like Three Idiots or PK? Okay. These are very important dimensions. Okay. Lagan is a movie, the way suppose I receive, it is against colonialism, against power structure, against all forms of domination, subordination, subjugation and exploitation. Lagan again is a movie which speaks against, speaks against the payment of Lagan, that payment that has to be made, and also the commodities that farming communities produce. If you look at suppose Three Idiots, this is an alternative way of learning. Learning cannot be done by rote. Rote learning is not the way to learn things. If you really want to learn, okay, then you have to express your ideas in novel ways. The entire education system, the entire marking system was interrogated in that movie, Three Idiots. If you look at suppose PK, the entire hitherto existing systems of superstition, religious bigotry, obscurantism, orthodoxy was questioned in PK. Okay, that's why these three, and of course many more are there. If you go to Do Bigha Jameen by all Bimal Roy, this movie, Balraj Sahni and others acted. Many movies produced by Raj Kapoor and so on. Okay, they were beyond their times. And the way the audience tries to receive it. Suppose Lage Raho Munna Bhai, how the audience receive it, how as a spectator I am going to receive it. Okay, that's why the dominant version is related to a traditionalist view of culture. Okay, but it is very important how, as part of audience, we are going to receive it. When I receive it, okay, reception is very often operational at three levels. One is acceptance, secondly rejection, and thirdly ambivalence. I do not know whether what is portrayed in that movie, in certain movies, I will accept it, I may accept it, I may reject it altogether. Okay. But at times I do not know whether to accept it or reject it, maintaining ambivalence. That actually I do not know whether it is good or bad, whether it is right or wrong. I am not able to accept or reject it. I am trying to maintain my ambivalence. Okay. This is how we tend to receive a particular movie or an advertisement and so on. Okay. Suppose in some while polishing your shoes, you will find that a school-going child, okay, he is trying to polish his pair of shoes, okay, and boot polish, shoe polish advertisement. How do you look at it? Somebody may say that yes, that little child is very self-sufficient. He knows how to carry out his job before going to school. But somebody may say that no, it amounts to child labor. How you tend to receive them? That's important. Okay. The way all such advertisements about cosmetics and so on, the way they have been gaining momentum in the world of advertisements and so on, I tend to feel that there is absolute racism in such advertisements. That being black cannot be celebrated. You always tend to be, you should be white to be celebrated. That is absolute racism, okay, on the basis of skin color. Okay. That is why how you receive them more commonly involves the projection of analysis of text onto assumptions about audiences constituted by text rather than as using text for their own purposes. For example, Weberian elective affinity. Against this position, Angela Macroby, in Postmodern and Popular Culture, defends a more sociologically informed analysis which broadens our notion of cultural production and reception as practices and attempts to recover the everyday meanings such as of clothes shopping. Arguments about production of postmodern culture nevertheless lead into discussion on postmodernity as a historical condition, okay? And arguments about reception of postmodern culture or the modes of perception revealed or created by it lead into discussion on postmodernism as an attack on modern forms of knowledge and their assumptions and legitimacy. And from this, that arguments about production of postmodern culture which lead us to a discussion on postmodernity as a historical condition assumes greater significance in this context. Okay. This is, I mean, when we say postmodernity as a historical condition, okay, this is effectively one construction placed on a series of observations about contemporary trends, okay, which have also been deployed in relation to now discounted theories about post-industrialism. I mean, you can look at Alvin Toffler, Daniel Bell, and so on. Even if you want to look at even Marshall McLuhan, who coined the term globalization, okay, as well as in relation to arguments about disorganized capitalism by Lash and Uri and radicalized modernity by Anthony Giddens and so on. Okay, radicalized modernity or radicalized rationality. Okay, the argument can be presented as a series of contrasts. The argument, I mean, against the Fordist production methods, I mean, based on economies of scale, that large scale production, assembly line production, Fordist method production. I mean, there is a shift from Fordist to post-Fordist organization of production with increased flexibility, subcontracting, small batch production and so on, with an increasingly important role for knowledge, I mean, managerial skill, scientific expertise, information technology and so on. Okay. The argument also can be presented like this, that against an economy based on material production for arguably real needs, there is a shift to the production of symbols, cultural artifacts and so on. Against the post-Second World War welfare state compromise, there is a shift to a neo-conservatism based on the decline of collective bargaining and the weakening of the nation state. Okay. There are 7 contrasts that we are going to present here. Then you will also find against old social movements of modernity, old social movements which were based on class position, economic class position, I mean industrial workers movements and so on. Now there is a formation of new social movements which undermine the holistic claims of the workers movements. I mean, new social movements, I mean, they include women, environmentalists and so on, even peasantry. Against the distinction between high culture and low culture, okay, I mean against the high culture, low culture division of modernist culture, there is a general shift to a fragmented and pluralist postmodern cultural configuration. There is a shift from socialization coupled with determination by social relations to individualization and interaction above all with the spectacle. And there is also a shift in the social construction of time and space or in their meanings, I mean history, place, community, identity and so on. We have already discussed this, I mean in the context of Giddens, Anthony Giddens, okay. I mean structuration theory, duality of structure, time-space distanciation and so on. Okay. Then what are these contrasts? These 7 contrasts. That one is, there is a shift from Fordist production methods to post-Fordist organization of production with increased flexibility, subcontracting, small batch production, with an increasingly important role for knowledge at the managerial skill, scientific expertise, information and communication technologies and so on. One. Secondly, there is a shift to the production of symbols, cultural artifacts and so on, from material production to the production of symbols. Thirdly, there is a shift from the post Second World War welfare state compromise to a new conservatism based on the decline of collective bargaining and the weakening of the nation state. And there is a shift from old social movements to new social movements. There is a shift from high culture, low culture divide to a fragmented and pluralist postmodern cultural configuration. There is a shift from socialization plus determination by social relations to individualization and interaction above all with the spectacle. And there is a shift in the social construction of time and space or in their meanings. Meanings are generated through history, time, space, place, community, identity and so on. Okay. We can go on and on with these shifts. Okay. What does it imply? What do these contrasts imply? I can go on and on with such contrasts. This is just one possible list, but it identifies the kind of things that are being pointed to. And this list points to the wider claims being made by arguments about the postmodern condition. Okay? This postmodern condition, this is very important, and here we are going to discuss many things. Lyotard, Lacan, Frederick Jameson, and so on, David Harvey, and so on. Okay, this postmodern condition, they can be taken to pull the carpet away from the Marxist analysis of capitalism as a mode of economic organization, from a strategy oriented around the working class as the central agent of social transformation, and from a hope for greater substantive rationality through education, socialization, science, increased rational control of the environment and so on. What is generally missed in this kind of argument, that it is a very limited kind of Marxism, very often one belonging to postmodernist authors themselves in an earlier incarnation, which is being taken to stand for the whole of Marxism, in particular a 1970s mix of Lenin, Trotsky, and Althusser, that is being taken to represent the totality of the meanings and practices of both Marxist authors and of the workers' movement. Okay? This is very important. Okay. Secondly, they can also be taken as relating to a further development within capitalism itself, in which case the challenge is to reformulate a form of historical materialism which is not contradicted by these developments and dispenses with the local analysis of Marx, Lenin and so on, for the sake of retaining the more general elements of the materialist conception of history, popularly known as historical materialism. And this is the line taken by two of the central responses to the postmodern challenge. Okay. One is Frederick Jameson, okay, and we'll also discuss Krishan Kumar's reflections on this. Okay. What Frederick Jameson in Postmodernism or the cultural logic of late capitalism and David Harvey's the condition of postmodernity, these two are the central responses to the postmodern challenge. Both of these authors take the line that the postmodernists are pointing to something of relevance, and Jameson in particular finds the concept of postmodernism a useful one in cultural analysis, but do not accept that these points need to mean a retreat from Marxism. Okay. This is very important. And then such approach, along with the arguments posed by Giddens and Habermas, which sees contemporary society in terms of radicalized modernity. Okay. It's a term used by radicalized modernity was used by Giddens. And such approach has strong empirical support within this kind of argument. For example, the working class is not a homogeneous whole, but something which has periodically been disintegrated by shifts within capitalism since the 18th century, okay, and which has periodically reconstituted itself. Similarly, the welfare state, or the neo-corporatist compromise that can be seen simply as a movement within the longer development of capitalism. Even the apparent shift in emphasis from the production of material goods to the production of knowledge has to be severely qualified. Most of the relevant arguments were made 20 years ago in Krishan Kumar's polemic against theories of post-industrialism. Okay? I mean that postmodernity as a historical condition, okay, must be grounded. Just to make a couple of obvious points here. Okay? One, industrialism as a technique has been organized around the appropriation of knowledge from the workers and its redeployment, at least since Ford and Taylor in the 1920s. This is not restricted to what we think of as industry, but has been exported to become the dominant mode of organization both of agricultural activity and of services. And secondly, it has to be recollected, it has to be remembered that there was an agricultural merchant modernity and an agricultural merchant capitalism prior to the development of industrial production in the secondary sector. Okay. Okay. If I have to capture these couple of obvious points, okay, if you look at Alvin Toffler's the third wave, I mean the first wave is the agricultural society, the second wave is the industrial society, and the third wave is the information society, which is very often known as the post-industrial society. Even Manuel Castells and Daniel Bell and so on, they have also reflected on this. Okay, what are the constituents what are the grounding principles of such post-industrialism or the information society? Okay, I mean standardization, specialization, synchronization, maximization, concentration and centralization. These are the 6 grounding principles of the information society or post-industrial society. This is very important. Okay, that is the third wave that Toffler talked about, or the coming of post-industrial society, which Daniel Bell reflected on, or the network society, which Cassels talked about, or the wired society, as James Martin talked about. Okay. In other words, the claim that postmodernity is a specific historical condition which displaces modernity has generally been met, in particular within sociology, by pointing out that what is singled out as modernity is in fact a very limited and specific part of modernity, so that what is now happening is better understood as another stage in the longer history of modernity. Okay. I will be going into this response more closely in the next couple of lectures. For the moment, it is enough to point out that most sociologists do not accept the claim that modernity is over, while many would accept the proposition that postmodernism certainly represents a new cultural configuration linked to a new phase in the development of modernity as a social configuration. This is most commonly presented in a Marxist form, but a Weberian version of the argument is certainly possible and has been made both by Giddens and Brand Turner. That what we talk about postmodernism, modernists argue, the proponents of modernity, they argue that no, what is postmodernism? It is an extension of modernity. But for the proponents of postmodernism, postmodernism is not an extension of modernity. Rather, postmodernism is a perspective which has been able to refute or reject modernity in totality. The central challenge to critical modernist paradigm in sociology, okay, then is neither the argument about a postmodern aesthetics which many modernists are happy to accept, nor the argument about postmodernity as a historical condition which is taken to be misunderstanding of developments that can be adequately accounted for within the terms of critical modernist paradigm in sociology. It relates to the ontological claims of postmodernist philosophy. Okay. What we are going to do in the next lecture, that we will discuss postmodernism as ontology, postmodernism also as epistemology. Okay. Because from the very beginning, when we started discussing Wallerstein, Habermas and Giddens, especially Giddens, in the context of Giddens, we started with the distinction between modernity and postmodernism. Okay. If modernity is based on certain epistemological foundation, okay, postmodernism rejects any kind of epistemological foundation. Okay. This is very important. Okay. That's why these ontological claims of postmodernist philosophy must be understood against the backdrop of such anti-foundational crisis. I mean, the way postmodernists go ahead in rejecting any kind of epistemological foundation. Okay. Then in this lecture, what we have discussed quickly, okay, we started our discussion on deconstruction of modernity through the lens of postmodernism, and we have discussed the postmodernist phenomenon, then how postmodernism emerged in the mid 1980s as a buzzword, but then extended backwards to cover developments in literature and literary criticism, philosophy, visual art, architecture and so on since the 1950s, and also especially from the 1970s onward. It has its intellectual antecedents in the French post-structuralist philosophy and its encounter with Anglo-American literary criticism and cultural studies, and now governing a set of ideas in at least some contexts. Okay. We have discussed how postmodernism is based on three central ideas, namely culture, society and meta-narratives. Culture as produced and received is postmodern in form and content. Society, especially political economy, can now be seen as having moved into a postmodern condition. Okay. And for a variety of reasons, the meta-narratives which legitimate the knowledge of modern intellectuals can no longer be sustained, and so on. Okay. And then we have discussed postmodernist aesthetics. I mean, how do people receive literature, film, television, advertisements and so on, because they, the dominant version is related to a traditionalist view of culture as cultural artifacts. I mean, sometimes taken one step further into discussion of reception by audience. Okay. We have also discussed Macrobes, postmodernism and popular culture. Okay. I mean, how we have made some arguments about the production of postmodern culture, nevertheless lead into discussion on postmodernity as a historical condition. Okay. Arguments about reception of postmodern culture or the modes of perception revealed or created by it lead into discussion on postmodernism as an attack on modern forms of knowledge and their assumptions and legitimacy. Then we have discussed postmodernity as a historical condition. Okay. How this is effectively one construction placed on a series of observations about contemporary trends, which have also been deployed in relation to now discounted theories about post-industrialism, as well as in relation to arguments about disorganized capitalism and radicalized modernity. Okay. And we have presented this argument as a series of contrasts. Okay. I mean, the shift from Fordist production methods to post-Fordist organization of production with increased flexibilities of contracting small batch production with an increasingly important role of knowledge and so on. And secondly, there is a shift from material production to the production of symbols cultural artifacts and so on. There is a shift from post Second World War welfare state compromise to new conservatism based on the decline of collective bargaining and the weakening of the nation state. Okay. We have also discussed the shift from old social movements to new social movements. We have also discussed the shift from high culture, low culture divide of modernist culture to a more fragmented and pluralist postmodern cultural configuration. Okay. We have also discussed how there is a shift from socialization coupled with determination by social relations to individualization and interaction above all with the spectacle. And this is particularly related to Anthony Giddens, that there is a shift in the social construction of time and space or in their meanings, I mean history, place, community and identity and so on. And then we have discussed how they can be taken to pull the carpet away from the Marxist analysis of capitalism as a mode of economic organization, from a strategy oriented around the working class as the central agent of social transformation, and from a hope for greater substantive rationality through education, socialization, science, increased rational control of the environment and so on. Okay. And then we have discussed how they can be taken as relating to a further development within capitalism itself, in which case the challenge is to reformulate a form of historical materialism, which is not contradicted by these developments and dispenses with the local analysis of Marx, Lenin and so on, for the sake of retaining the more general elements of the materialist conception of history. And this is the line taken by two of the central responses to the postmodern challenge, namely Frederick Jensen and David Harvey. Both Jensen and Harvey take the line that the postmodernists are pointing to something of relevance, but they do not accept that these points need to mean a retreat from Marxism. Okay? And this approach, along with Giddens Habermas' argument, which sees contemporary society in terms of radicalized modernity, has strong empirical support within this kind of argument. I mean, we have discussed how working class, what is a working class? It is no longer a homogeneous category. Such questions were posed afresh. Okay? And then we made two quick points, that how industrialism as a technique has been organized around the appropriation of knowledge from the workers and its redeployment, at least since Ford and Taylor in the 1920s. And this is not restricted to what we think of as industry, but has been exported to become the dominant mode of organization, both of agricultural activity and of services. It has to be remembered that there was an agricultural merchant modernity and an agricultural merchant capitalism prior to the development of industrial production in the secondary sector. Okay? And then we have also discussed how the claim that postmodernity is a specific historical condition which displaces modernity that has generally been met, in particular within sociology, by pointing out that what is singled out as modernity is in fact a very limited and specific part of modernity, so that what is now happening is better understood as another stage in the longer history of modernity. Okay? The proposition that postmodernism represents a new cultural configuration linked to a new phase in the development of modernity as a social configuration. Okay? That postmodernity as a historical condition, okay, that this is most commonly presented in the Marxist framework, but a Weberian version of the argument is certainly possible. We have already discussed this, and through the works of Anthony Giddens and Brian Turner, one can examine postmodernity as a historical condition. In the next lecture, we are going to discuss postmodernism as ontology, postmodernism as epistemology, and then we will discuss feminism and postmodernism as a test case. Okay? Thank you.